Hello and welcome to the Straight Talk. This is Sumit Chaturvedi, and today we have with us ace banker Uday Kotak, who has become the new president of CII. He is also the managing director of Kotak Mahindra Bank. Welcome to you, Mr. Kotak, on Straight Talk. Well, let's begin by asking you, you have taken over as CII president at a time of unprecedented crisis facing Indian economy. We are staring at a GDP degrowth, and challenges in front of economy are also immense. What are your priorities going to be when you have taken over as CII president?
Thank you very much. And I think this is truly uncharted times for the world when we are battling a very significant battle between lives and livelihoods. Also, the whole issue about the virus, the lockdown, getting out of the lockdown, and the future for all of us. And in this context, we have also got to keep in mind that this is a significant opportunity for India to reset itself. Therefore, as CII, we have first started by redefining the goals of CII. And the way we have put our theme for the year is building India for a new world, lives, livelihood, growth. So the whole focus of our theme this year is how do we build India in what is now clearly looking like a new world ahead of us. And within that, we have created 10 lenses to this theme.
Okay, and how do you see the post-coronavirus world, especially the economic recovery? How many quarters do you think it will take to bring the Indian economy back on track?
I think it's a question which first gets related to the answer on science and health. But if we assume that a cure or a vaccine is not going to be around for, say, about 9 to 12 months at least from here, we are then talking about a path to recovery with a hope of a vaccine or a cure in about a year as the basis of the broad plan going forward. And in that context, as we come out of the lockdown, we've started with a very material lockdown in the month of April. And I see a gradual recovery to normalcy happen through the year. And if I was trying to estimate, my reasonable estimate would be that if February 2020 was around 100 in terms of GDP, I would like to see us getting close to the near normal on a month-on-month basis by February or March 2021. And beyond that, of course, is the challenge to medium-term growth. And the big focus from our point of view as Indian business, industry, and of course, in a collaboration with government, is how do we improve the medium-term growth trajectory of India over the next 2 to 3 years.
And what is your assessment regarding hit to the global economic growth when you compare coronavirus crisis with the 2008 financial crisis that was due to the failure of Lehman Brothers? How do you compare these two crises?
The global crisis was a financial crisis. It was embedded in excessive financial leverage around the world. And therefore, the Federal Reserve and central banks around the world could take a disproportionate printing of money approach to solve that problem. Of course, this time around also, central banks have thrown a lot of money at this challenge. But the long-term solution to this lies in science and health, which is an answer to the virus and the impact of the virus to lives.
Okay, and a few days ago, PM Moody, while addressing CII's 125th annual convention, he said getting growth back is not difficult. He said India Inc. should rise to the occasion and industry needs to invest in robust supply chains. How much that will be possible for the industry and how much would be very difficult to achieve?
I clearly believe that the time has come for us to significantly up our game as Indian business. And if there are 4 layers of growth or 4 levers of growth, it is investment, consumption, net exports, and of course, government spending. Historically, in the last few years, government spending has been at the cutting edge, followed by consumption, which was holding up growth. It's now time for private investment and net exports to take a significant share. And net exports is a very important word. On the one hand, it means making India Atmanirbhar and more competitive in terms of manufacturing or producing in India which leads to imports coming down. And here I am convinced that an Atmanirbhar Bharat is also consistent with a competitive India and engaged with the world. On the other hand, this export engine also needs to fire. Therefore, the two legs where I would really like to pitch our future on is getting back private investment and also getting back exports and getting our imports substituted by competitive Indian manufacturing.
And a few days ago, Moody's has downgraded India's credit ratings first time in over 2 decades. It says GDP will shrink by 4% in FY21. Your reaction to that?
First of all, rating is a view taken by an agency. Its view on the data which is in front of it. The downgrade by Moody takes us to the same level as S&P and Fitch, though with a negative bias. The way I would look at it is the financial markets have not been impacted by Moody's downgrade. Having said that, I would look at the rationale of what Moody's has said, and some of the points in the rationale are something we must act on. We need medium-term growth back, and rather than worrying about just this year's growth or month-on-month situation, what are the economic policies and steps we are taking now to get medium-term growth back? That should be our priority.
And Mr. Kotak, India versus China debate is getting interesting day by day. Where do you think India needs to do? What should India do to improve so that it can attract companies who want to shift base from China to India?
Clearly, I think China has been the factory of the world. It's time for India to get its fair share, especially when the world is concerned about concentration risk of manufacturing facilities in China. So clearly, that is something which is an opportunity for India to get some of the manufacturing in India. And therefore, Make in India and taking steps to make India more competitive on manufacturing is clearly a big opportunity. But I also see another major opportunity, that while China is the factory of the world, we want some of that share coming to India. The big opportunity also is making India the office of the world. And when I use the word office, I use it both for front office and back office. Working from home has made it possible to be a front office sitting anywhere in the world and working for any company in any other part of the world. And India, whether it is its cities, towns, or even villages with competent education and engineering background or other skills across different verticals, is a very significant opportunity for India to be the office of the world.
But are there some impediments or shortcomings, well, that has to be improved before these companies come to India, or India should be made more attractive for these companies? What are the steps that are required, if you think there are some steps that are needed?
There are a number of steps. First of all, I think we have corrected the tax rates. Okay, so investing from a manufacturing facility in India from a tax point of view is much better. We need to debottleneck a lot of the physical and infrastructure issues. And I frankly believe for India to be a competitive manufacturer in the world, yes, we must attract people from other parts of the world, but it is also possible for Indian manufacturing to also take advantage of this opportunity. So clearly an opportunity beckoning us to act and act now. And I think the government's mindset has also got far more open and positive to partner business. And it is here that Indian business now needs to rise to the occasion. And I do believe Indian business has it in them to rise to the occasion.
And how do you respond to the recent decisions on restricting FDI, especially targeting China?
I think we have to really look at, we need to be clear about a few things. There is an issue about what is important for national security. And those issues will always come up because you don't want to give up the sovereignty of a nation. And every country has rules to ensure protection on that. Therefore, India must do what it needs to protect. However, we should balance it by also ensuring that India remains competitive and engaged with the world. And the fact of the matter is, China is our neighbor, and that is a reality we will always have.
And what's your response to 20 lakh crore rupees stimulus announced by the government so far? Is it enough or more is needed?
Obviously, in a crisis like this, more is better. But the fiscal deficit situation pre-COVID, which was around center plus states put together, 6.5%, is already between 11 and 12% of GDP. So if we have seen a 5 percentage point increase in the fiscal deficit, it means that the real cost India is paying or Indian government is paying in the current year, and 5 percentage points of fiscal deficit translates to 5% of 200 lakh crores, which is India's GDP. And that is 10 lakh crores of additional fiscal deficit India has already taken because of COVID.
Okay, and what is your reaction to the way India handled the coronavirus pandemic? Do you think things would have been better without strict lockdown, at least economically? How do you see the overall lockdown over the last 3 months?
Debate about lockdown or no lockdown is a very theoretical debate. Let me ask the reverse question. Say currently the number of deaths we have in India is about 6,000. Assume for the moment from 24th March we had no lockdowns. Okay, let's look at the other extreme position. Do you think the number of deaths would have been 6,000? Less or more? It's again all in the realm of imagination. What if it had been 60,000 or 600,000? Would we have sat here and said, oh gosh, why did we not lock down? Therefore, we are taking these decisions in real lifetime. We do not have the advantage of any data or a precedence in terms of our decision making. And we have to take a decision what sounds or we believe to be right at that point of time. And certainly, the fact that the total number of deaths in India has been around 6,000 is a positive because it's the lowest death ratio anywhere in the world, as I understand, amongst the bigger countries.
And Mr. Kotak, how do you see the recent growth in Indian stock markets? Are the bulls back in action there?
On the stock markets, we have to be clear. You talk to investors and analysts on the market, and what they are saying is we believe that the year 2021 from an earnings point of view is a washout. We are looking at earnings in 2022 and 23 and making our estimates on that basis. And basis that we are making our investment decisions. So I think there's a very important point the stock markets are saying, whether right or wrong. What they are saying is this is medium-term earnings. They are estimating to come back. And therefore, at some point of time in the next 6 months to a year, there would be a solution to the virus. And therefore, 22 and 23 will look better. If I use the same principle for a stock called India, we need to focus on medium-term growth and getting the engines for medium-term growth right. And therefore, what we at CII have announced is significant investments in healthcare, education, rebalancing of rural and urban situations, focusing on private investment and net exports, and making growth an interim as a non-negotiable requirement in the medium term. So really thinking about a strategic and a structural growth story for India rather than immediate short-term bounce.
Mr. Kotak, many sectors like aviation, tourism, they say that they haven't been given anything of a significant scale so far. Tourism has completely been neglected. Aviation is still in doldrums. There's no clarity there. Do you subscribe or do you agree to this fact that over the past few months, whenever the stimulus has been announced, aviation and tourism are the two sectors that still need more help from the government side?
There is no unlimited money. Okay, so there is an X amount of money. India is not a reserve currency. So India has to make the hard choices between putting money at place A or versus place B. And let me pose this question in a different way. Think about the aviation sector. Of course, it is under pressure, but there are many competitive players in that sector. Therefore, should the government be using to protect a player number 5 from getting out of business, or should the government invest that money into developing Indian healthcare for the next 2 to 3 years? These priorities will determine where support is given and where it is not. Similarly, let's take the case of malls or retail stores versus e-commerce. If a consumer chooses more e-commerce as the basis for buying, and therefore malls go empty, government has to take the call. The consumer has decided what he or she chooses. And therefore, there is a marketplace, and business stress is an inevitable part of a market stress situation. The government has to use its money well as a bottom line, do it in more structural areas like healthcare and education. At the same time, protecting here and now. We must protect lives and livelihoods. For that, whatever money is required, we must spend. We must put money in social security as people lose jobs. But to save businesses which are non-competitive, it may not be the right way to be putting money.
Okay, and one important factor is crude. Crude went down, now it's coming up once again. It's slowly recovering. How do you see this as big relief for Indian companies, Indian economy?
I think as long as Brent is below $60, India is fine.
And one question to you on your personal life, sir. How has your life changed in lockdown so far? You have been doing a lot of deal makings and all. How has your life changed in lockdown?
New reality to all our lives. Working from home actually makes you work harder and far more productive. My levels of productivity are much higher than what they used to be at the physical workplace. And let me just look at in normal course, if I was doing this interview at the behest of CII, I would have in normal course taken a flight to Delhi, been there, been in an office of CII or in a meeting room in some hotel and had you shoot a television interview versus I'm here in my home and able to do an interview with no loss of efficiency and high productivity. Therefore, I feel working from home is a very serious option and dramatic improvement to productivity. In the short run, we can get away with it without physical face-to-face meetings, but in the long run, there is a value to physical meetings as well.
So last 2-3 quick questions before I let you go. It's natural sometimes to compare India and India's handling of coronavirus crisis to Western world. So how do you see US is seeing a lot of deaths now, Western world as really not able to prevent so many deaths. Could they have done it better?
On the Western world, if I take the example of Germany within Europe, they've done it much better than any other country. That's because they had a world-class healthcare infrastructure system. On the other hand, you look at Sweden, they took an out-of-the-box call. They did not do any lockdowns. But the death rates in Sweden are much higher than the rest of Scandinavia. So some of the countries have experimented and different outcomes have come in different countries. So it just proves that there is no one solution. Each country has to look to its reality. And in India, the reality is a very dense, urban-centric population. And that is at much higher risk than in more scant areas of population. And India has actually faced that as the challenge, which is deep, concentrated population, poor healthcare facilities in slums and chawls. And that's where the death ratios have been higher. So it is also for us to redefine how we are going to look at all these situations. And how do we think about social security as jobs change, as migrants want to go back to their villages? How do we get the balance between rural and urban right? So a whole host of questions, some of them related to Indian reality. And let's do what is right for India using our common sense and obviously knowledge of science and data. And if some other country does better, good to them. Somebody does worse. So that is the way, they took their decisions. There is no one right answer for dealing with this virus who is completely unpredictable.
So one last question on RBI. What do you think about the steps taken by RBI? Do you think interest rates reduction is enough to spur investments from the corporate side? What's your take on the interest rates lowering, and will it bring the investments back to our economy?
I think there's been very significant drop in interest rates by the RBI, and it is very material. Not only have the repo rates been dropped, we are now also operating at the lower end of the corridor, which is the reverse repo rate. Therefore, the drop in short-term rates is very sharp. The drop in longer-term rates has been less because of concerns about financing of the deficit as we go forward and how much is monetized, and that is a reality. But all in all, I feel pretty confident that RBI has moved. It has moved, including in terms of creating liquidity, and created an enabling platform for getting medium-term growth back. I'm quite hopeful of the medium term.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Kotak, for giving us your time and talking to us on all these important issues on WION. So we were talking to CI President Uday Kotak, who has called for extraordinary efforts to revive the Indian economy. Mr. Kotak is also of the view that lenders and firms need to work together to get the economy back on track. News and updates will continue on the other side of the break. Have a good day.